In the sprawling metropolis of Dallas, Texas, where gleaming skyscrapers pierce the endless sky, and where the pursuit of wealth and success drives the relentless rhythm of daily life, 26-year-old Victoria Blackwood sat alone in her silver Mercedes-Benz in the parking lot of a modest grocery store, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she clutched her phone with trembling heart. NDS, having just received the most devastating news of her privileged life. Subscribe to the channel to help me reach 1,000 subscribers and bring you even better stories. Victoria was the only daughter of Richard Blackwood, one of the most successful real estate moguls in the Southwest, a man whose empire of luxury developments and commercial properties had made him worth over $400 million and had provided his family with every conceivable luxury that money could buy. She had grown up in a 15,000-square-foot mansion in the exclusive Highland Park neighborhood, attended the finest private schools, graduated from Yale University with a degree she had never needed to use, and had spent most of her adult life managing charitable foundations and attending society events, living what most people would consider a fairy tale existence. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon in October, as autumn leaves danced in the Texas wind and ordinary people went about their daily routines, Victoria's world had come crashing down in a way that no amount of money could fix. The phone call had come from Dr. Margaret Harrison, the family's longtime physician, with news that had shattered every assumption Victoria had ever held about her future. "Victoria, I need you to come to my office immediately," Dr. Harrison had said, her usually warm voice carrying an ominous weight that had made Victoria's stomach drop. "It's about your father. There are some test results we need to discuss, and it can't wait." The drive to the medical center had been a blur of anxiety and dread, but nothing could have prepared Victoria for what she learned in Dr. Harrison's sterile office. "Victoria, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but your father has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer," the doctor had said gently, her words hitting Victoria like physical blows. "The cancer has metastasized extensively, and I'm afraid the prognosis is very poor. We're looking at perhaps 3 to 6 months." Victoria had sat in stunned silence as Dr. Harrison explained the medical details, the treatment options, and the grim reality that her father, the man who had seemed invincible, who had built an empire through sheer force of will, was dying. "Does he know?" Victoria had finally managed to whisper. "Yes, he insisted on knowing everything. He's asked me to coordinate with you about how to handle the family business and personal affairs. He wants to make sure everything is in order for you and your mother." The weight of this responsibility, combined with the devastating news about her father's condition, had overwhelmed Victoria completely. She had fled the medical center in a daze, driving aimlessly through Dallas until she had pulled into the parking lot of a small grocery store, where she had finally broken down completely. Now, sitting in her luxury car surrounded by the ordinary vehicles of working-class people, Victoria felt more alone and helpless than she had ever felt in her life. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from her mother, her father's business associates, and family friends, but she couldn't bring herself to answer any of them. "How am I supposed to handle this?" she sobbed to herself, her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. "I don't know anything about running a business. I don't know anything about real life. All I've ever done is spend money and attend parties." The realization of her own helplessness and inexperience had hit her like a physical blow. Despite her expensive education and privileged upbringing, Victoria had never been required to develop any practical skills or real-world experience. Her father had always handled everything, making decisions about investments, business operations, and even her personal finances. She had lived in a bubble of wealth and comfort, completely insulated from the challenges that ordinary people faced every day. As she sat there crying, Victoria became aware of someone tapping gently on her passenger window. Through her tears, she could see a man in his early 30s wearing a simple work uniform and holding a small bag of groceries. He had kind eyes and a concerned expression, and despite her emotional state, Something about his presence seemed calming rather than threatening. Victoria hesitated for a moment, then rolled down her window slightly. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but I noticed you've been sitting here for a while, and you seem really upset," the man said gently. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Is there anything I can do to help?" Victoria looked at him through her tears, struck by the genuine concern in his voice. In her world, people were always polite and helpful, but usually because they wanted something from her family's wealth and connections. This man, however, seemed to be offering help simply because he saw someone in distress. I don't think there's anything anyone can do," she managed to say between sobs. "My father is dying and I don't know how to handle anything without him." The man's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Losing a parent is one of the hardest things anyone can go through," he said quietly. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I lost my own father 2 years ago, so I have some idea of what you're going through. Would you like to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands. And if you don't want to talk, that's okay too, but you shouldn't have to go through this alone." Something about Marcus's genuine kindness and the fact that he'd experienced a similar loss made Victoria feel slightly less alone. "I'm Victoria," she said, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I just found out my father has terminal cancer, and I feel completely lost. I've never had to handle anything important on my own before." Marcus nodded with understanding. "That's completely understandable, Victoria. When my father was diagnosed with heart disease, I felt the same way. It's overwhelming to suddenly realize that someone you've always depended on won't be there forever. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the most important thing isn't being prepared for everything. It's being willing to learn and to ask for help when you need it. And it sounds like your father is still here right now, which means you have time to learn from him and to spend time with him." Victoria found herself really listening to Marcus's words, struck by his practical wisdom and the calm way he spoke about such difficult topics. "You're right," she said, her tears beginning to slow. "I've been so focused on how unprepared I am that I haven't thought about making the most of the time we have left." Marcus smiled gently. "That's exactly right. And you know what else? You're probably more capable than you think you are. Sometimes we don't discover our own strength until we're forced to use it. I can tell you're intelligent and caring, Victoria. Those are the most important qualities for handling difficult situations. The technical knowledge can be learned, but character and compassion, those come from within." They talked for another 20 minutes, with Marcus sharing some of his own experiences dealing with his father's illness and death, and offering practical advice about how to approach difficult conversations and decisions. "Marcus, I can't thank you enough for stopping to help me," Victoria said as their conversation began to wind down. "You didn't have to take time out of your day to talk to a complete stranger, but you did, and it means more than you know. We all need help sometimes, Victoria. That's what makes us human," Marcus replied. "And if you ever need someone to talk to who understands what you're going through, please don't hesitate to reach out." He handed her a simple business card that read, "Marcus Thompson, automotive technician," with a phone number. "I know we come from very different worlds, but grief and loss are universal experiences. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who isn't part of your usual circle. Name." As Marcus walked away toward his modest pickup truck, Victoria sat in her car, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine gratitude for human kindness that expected nothing in return. For the first time since receiving the devastating news about her father, she felt like she might be able to face what lay ahead. She also realized that in her 26 years of life, she had rarely experienced such authentic human connection. Most of her relationships were built around social status, family connections, or mutual benefit. But Marcus had offered her something much rarer, genuine compassion from one human being to another, with no agenda or expectation of reward. As she started her car to drive home, Victoria found herself thinking not just about her father's illness, but about the kind of person she wanted to become during this difficult time. Marcus had shown her that strength could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important help comes from the most unlikely sources. Chapter 2. The Learning Process and Unexpected Friendship. In the days following her encounter with Marcus in the parking lot, Victoria found herself thinking constantly about their conversation and the perspective he had offered on dealing with loss and discovering inner strength. His words had given her the courage to finally return home and have the difficult conversation with her father that she had been avoiding since receiving the diagnosis. Richard Blackwood was in his study when Victoria found him, sitting behind the massive mahogany desk where he had conducted business deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but now looking smaller and more fragile than she had ever seen him. "Dad, I spoke with Dr. Harrison," Victoria said quietly as she entered the room. "I know about the cancer." Richard looked up from the financial documents he had been reviewing, and Victoria could see both relief and sadness in his eyes. "I was wondering when you'd come to talk to me about it," he said, gesturing for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. "I know this is overwhelming, sweetheart. It's overwhelming for me, too." "Dad, I need to be honest with you about something," Victoria said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know anything about running the business or managing our finances. I've lived my whole life without learning any practical skills, and now I'm terrified that I won't be able to handle things when you're not here anymore." Richard studied his daughter's face for a long moment, and she could see a mixture of regret and determination in his expression. "Victoria, that's partly my fault. I wanted to protect you from the stress and complications of business, so I never involved you in the real operations. But you're right, that was a mistake. We need to change that, starting now. But I also need you to understand something important. You're much more capable than you think you are. You have a good education, you're intelligent, and you have good instincts about people. What you lack is experience, and that can be gained." Over the following weeks, Richard began an intensive process of teaching Victoria about every aspect of the family business. They spent hours each day going through financial statements, reviewing property portfolios, meeting with key employees and business partners, and discussing the strategic decisions that had built the Blackwood empire. "The real estate business isn't just about buying and selling properties, Victoria," Richard explained during one of their sessions. "It's about understanding people, communities, and long-term trends. It's about building relationships and creating value, not just making quick profits." Victoria found herself genuinely interested in the business for the first time in her life, discovering that she had inherited more of her father's analytical mind than she had realized. But the learning process was also emotionally challenging, as she could see her father's health declining with each passing week. During this intense period of education and bonding, Victoria found herself thinking often about Marcus and the conversation that had started this journey of discovery. One evening, after a particularly difficult day when her father had been too weak to continue their business discussions, she decided to call him. "Marcus, this is Victoria from the parking lot a few weeks ago," she said when he answered the phone. "Victoria, I've been wondering how you were doing. How are things with your father?" Marcus responded warmly. "It's been hard, but also good in some ways. We've been spending a lot of time together, and he's been teaching me about the family business. I wanted to thank you again for what you said that day. It really changed my perspective." "I'm so glad to hear that. It sounds like you're making the most of the time you have with him." "Marcus, I know this might sound strange, but would you like to have coffee sometime? I feel like I could use a friend who understands what I'm going through and who can give me a perspective from outside my usual world." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Victoria worried that she had overstepped some boundary. "I'd like that, Victoria. But I want to be honest with you. I'm just a regular guy who works on cars for a living. I don't know anything about business or high society. Are you sure you want to be friends with someone like me?" "Marcus, that's exactly why I want to be friends with you. You're genuine and kind, and you don't want anything from me except friendship. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" They arranged to meet at a small cafe in a middle-class neighborhood, far from the upscale establishments where Victoria usually spent her time. When she arrived, Victoria was struck by how different this environment was from her usual haunts. The cafe was simple and unpretentious, filled with working people grabbing coffee before their shifts or students studying with laptops. "This is nice," Victoria said as she sat down across from Marcus. "I don't think I've ever been in a place like this before." "Really? This is where I come almost every morning before work. The coffee's good, it's affordable, and the people are friendly. It's just normal life, I guess." As they talked, Victoria found herself fascinated by Marcus's perspective on everyday life, work, and relationships. He told her about his job as an automotive technician, his small apartment, his struggles to pay off student loans, and his simple pleasures like weekend hiking trips and pick-up basketball games with friends. "You know what I find amazing about your life," Victoria said. "You have to work for everything you have, but you seem so much more satisfied and grounded than most of the wealthy people I know." Marcus smiled. "I think when you have to work for things, you appreciate them more. And when your life is simpler, it's easier to focus on what really matters: relationships, health, personal growth, helping others. Plus, I've learned that happiness doesn't come from having more stuff. It comes from feeling useful, from building meaningful relationships, and from knowing that you're making a positive difference in some way." Victoria found herself thinking about Marcus's words long after their coffee meeting ended. She began to see her own life differently, recognizing how isolated she had become within her bubble of wealth and privilege. Over the following weeks, Victoria and Marcus developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. They met regularly for coffee, and Marcus introduced her to aspects of ordinary life she had never experienced. Grocery shopping at discount stores, eating at family-owned restaurants, attending community events. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" Marcus said during one of their meetings. "What do you want to do with your life? I mean, beyond just managing your father's business." Victoria was quiet for a moment, realizing that no one had ever asked her that question before. "I honestly don't know. I've never really thought about it. My whole life has been planned out for me. The right schools, the right social circles, the right charitable activities. But I've never asked myself what I actually want to do." "Gee, well, maybe this difficult time with your father is also an opportunity to figure that out. What makes you feel excited or passionate? What problems in the world do you wish you could help solve?" As Victoria continued learning about the family business and spending time with Marcus, she began to develop ideas about how she might use her inherited wealth and position to make a meaningful difference in the world. But she also began to realize that the most important changes were happening within herself. She was becoming more confident, more grounded, and more connected to the world beyond her privileged bubble. "Marcus, I've been thinking about what you asked me about what I want to do with my life," Victoria said during one of their coffee meetings. "I think I want to use whatever resources I inherit to help people who are facing the kinds of challenges you and your friends deal with every day. But I don't want to do it the way most wealthy people do charity, writing checks and attending galas. I want to actually understand the problems and work directly with communities to find real solutions." Marcus had smiled at this declaration. "That sounds like something that could make a real difference, Victoria, but it also sounds like something that would require you to step way outside your comfort zone." "I think I'm ready for that," Victoria had replied. "Actually, I think I need it. This whole experience has shown me that I've been living in a bubble, and it's time to break out of it." Chapter 3. The Transformation and New Purpose. As autumn turned to winter in Dallas, Victoria's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Continue the story, please. Claude 4 Sonnet. As autumn turned to winter in Dallas, Victoria's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined when she first broke down crying in that grocery store parking lot. Her father's condition had continued to deteriorate, But the time they had spent together learning about the business had created a deeper bond between them than had ever existed before. Richard had been amazed by Victoria's quick grasp of complex financial concepts and her intuitive understanding of market dynamics. "Victoria, I have to admit something to you," Richard had said during one of their sessions in his study. "I was wrong to keep you away from the business for so long. You have a natural talent for this, and more importantly, you have ideas that I never would have considered. Your suggestion about developing affordable housing projects alongside our luxury developments is brilliant. It shows a social consciousness that I'm ashamed to say I never developed in my own career." Victoria's friendship with Marcus had continued to deepen, and through him she had begun to understand the challenges faced by working-class families in ways that her previous charitable work had never revealed. Marcus had introduced her to his circle of friends, other automotive technicians, nurses, teachers, and small business owners, and Victoria had been struck by their resilience, their strong sense of community, and their practical wisdom about life. "You know what I've learned from spending time with your friends?" Victoria had told Marcus during one of their coffee meetings. "They face real challenges every day, worrying about healthcare costs, struggling to save for their children's education, dealing with job insecurity. But they have something that most wealthy people I know don't have." "What's that?" Marcus had asked. "Authenticity, purpose. A sense that their lives matter because of the work they do and the people they care about, not because of what they own or how much money they have." Marcus had smiled at this observation. "You're starting to understand something important, Victoria. Money can solve a lot of problems, but it can't give you purpose or meaning. Those have to come from within and from how you choose to use whatever resources you have." This insight had sparked an idea that had been growing in Victoria's mind for weeks. "Marcus, what if I told you I was thinking about starting a foundation that would provide practical support to working families, things like emergency financial assistance, job training programs, and affordable childcare? I'd say that sounds like something that could make a real difference, but I'd also ask if you're thinking about this because you genuinely want to help people or because you're looking for a way to feel better about having so much when others have so little." Victoria appreciated Marcus's directness. It was one of the things she valued most about their friendship. "Honestly, it's probably a little of both, but I think that's okay, as long as the help is real and effective. I've been involved in charity work before, but it was always so removed from the actual problems people face. I want to do something different, something that actually addresses the root causes of financial instability." Over the following weeks, Victoria had begun developing a comprehensive plan for what she decided to call the Blackwood Foundation for Economic Empowerment. Unlike traditional charitable organizations that focused on providing temporary relief, Victoria's foundation would offer long-term solutions: microloans for small business development, partnerships with community colleges for job training programs, subsidized childcare centers, and financial literacy education. "The goal isn't to make people dependent on charity," Victoria had explained to her father as she presented her detailed proposal. "The goal is to give people the tools and opportunities they need to build stable, prosperous lives for themselves and their families." Richard had been impressed by the thoroughness of Victoria's research and the practical nature of her proposals. "Victoria, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that will make you successful in business and in life," he had said. "You're not just throwing money at problems, you're thinking systematically about how to create lasting change. I want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become, especially over these past few months. You've shown strength, intelligence, and compassion that I always knew you had, but that you never had the chance to develop before." As winter progressed, Richard's health had continued to decline, but he had remained actively involved in helping Victoria prepare to take over the business. They had worked together to restructure the company's operations, bringing in experienced managers who could provide guidance while Victoria developed her leadership skills. The most important thing I can teach you about business, Victoria, is that success isn't just about making money, Richard had told her during one of their final business discussions. It's about creating value for other people, your employees, your customers, your community. When you focus on that, the financial success follows naturally. Victoria had also been spending time getting to know the key employees of Blackwood Enterprises, many of whom had worked for her father for decades. She had been surprised to discover that several of them had innovative ideas for improving operations and expanding into new markets, but had never felt comfortable sharing these ideas with her father. "Ms. Blackwood, your father is a brilliant businessman, but he's always been very set in his ways," had explained Sarah Martinez, the company's head of operations. "You seem more open to new ideas, and that's exciting for those of us who have been thinking about ways to innovate." Victoria had established regular meetings with department heads to discuss their ideas and had been impressed by their creativity and dedication. She had also begun implementing some of their suggestions, including a profit-sharing program for employees and a commitment to sustainable building practices in all new developments. One evening in February, as Victoria was working late in her father's study, Marcus had called with an unexpected request. "Victoria, I know this is short notice, but would you be interested in coming to a community meeting tomorrow night? There's a proposal to close the neighborhood community center where a lot of kids go for after-school programs, and the residents are trying to figure out how to save it. I thought you might be interested in seeing how ordinary people organize to solve problems in their community. It might give you some ideas for your foundation." Victoria had agreed immediately, curious to see grassroots community organizing in action. The meeting had been held in the basement of a local church, with about 50 residents packed into folding chairs, discussing strategies for raising money to keep the community center open. Victoria had been struck by the passion and dedication of the participants, many of whom were working multiple jobs, but still found time to volunteer for community causes. "The center serves over 200 kids every day," had explained Elena Rodriguez, a single mother who worked as a nurse. "It's not just babysitting. They get homework help, hot meals, and mentoring from college students. For many of these kids, it's the difference between having a safe place to go after school and being on the streets." The center needed $150,000 to remain open for another year, an amount that seemed insurmountable to the working-class families in attendance, but that represented less than Victoria spent on clothes in a typical year. After listening to the discussion for an hour, Victoria had stood up. "Excuse me, I'm Victoria Blackwood. I'm here with my friend Marcus, and I've been listening to your discussion with great interest," she had said, her voice carrying clearly through the small room. "I'd like to make a proposal. I'm in the process of starting a foundation focused on supporting working families and strengthening communities. I would like to provide the $150,000 needed to keep this center open. But more than that, I'd like to partner with you to expand the programs and make them a model for other communities." The room had fallen silent, with people looking at each other in disbelief. "But I want to be clear about something," Victoria had continued. "This isn't charity. This is an investment in a community that has shown it knows how to solve problems and take care of its own. I want to learn from you as much as I want to help you." The response had been overwhelmingly positive, with many residents expressing both gratitude and excitement about the possibility of expanding the center's programs. Elena Rodriguez had approached Victoria after the meeting. "Ms. Blackwood, I have to ask, why are you doing this? You don't live in our neighborhood and you don't know any of us. What's in it for you?" Victoria had appreciated the directness of the question. "Honestly, a few months ago, I was completely lost and didn't know how to handle the challenges in my own life. A stranger helped me when I needed it most, and that experience taught me something important about the power of human connection and community support," Victoria had replied. "I've been incredibly fortunate in life, and I want to use that fortune to create the kind of community support that helped me when I needed it most. Plus, I've learned that helping others is one of the most fulfilling things you can do with your life. It gives you purpose and connects you to something bigger than yourself." Eleanor had smiled and extended her hand. "Well, Ms. Blackwood, I think you're going to fit in just fine around here." That night, as Victoria drove home from the community meeting, she had felt a sense of purpose and excitement that she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she was using her resources and abilities to make a tangible difference in people's lives, and the feeling was intoxicating. Dad would be proud, she had thought to herself as she pulled into the driveway of the family mansion, not just of the business success, but of the person I'm becoming. Chapter 4. The Legacy and Lasting Impact. 6 months later, as spring bloomed across Dallas, a new life emerged from the harsh winter. Victoria stood in the renovated community center that had become the flagship location for the Blackwood Foundation for Economic Empowerment, watching children participate in after-school programs that now included not only homework help and meals, but also computer literacy. Classes, art therapy, and mentorship programs run by local college students. The transformation had been remarkable, but it represented only the beginning of what had become a comprehensive approach to community development that was attracting attention from social workers, policymakers, and philanthropists across the country. Richard Blackwood had passed away peacefully in March, surrounded by his family and with the knowledge that his daughter had not only mastered the complexities of running the family business, but had also found a way to use their wealth to create meaningful change in the world. "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, sweetheart," had been among his final words to Victoria. "You've become the kind of leader I always hoped you would be, but you've also become something I never was. Someone who understands that true success means lifting others up along with yourself." The grief of losing her father had been profound, but Victoria had found strength in the knowledge that she was carrying forward his business legacy while also creating something entirely new, a model of philanthropy that focused on empowerment rather than dependency. The Blackwood Foundation had grown rapidly, with programs now operating in 12 communities across the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. The foundation's approach was comprehensive, providing microloans for small business development, partnering with community colleges to offer job training programs, establishing high-quality childcare centers, and creating financial literacy workshops that helped families build long-term stability. What makes this foundation different is that we don't just give people money and walk away, Victoria had explained during a presentation to the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. We invest in people's potential and provide ongoing support to help them build sustainable prosperity for themselves and their families. So, we've learned that the most effective way to help people is to listen to what they actually need, rather than assuming we know what's best for them. Every program we develop starts with extensive community input and is designed to address real, practical challenges. The results had been impressive. Over 300 small businesses had been launched with foundation microloans, with a repayment rate of 94%. More than 800 adults had completed job training programs, with 85% finding employment within 6 months of graduation. The Foundation's childcare centers were serving over 100 to 200 children, allowing their parents to work or attend school without worrying about their children's safety and well-being. But perhaps, most importantly, the Foundation had helped create a sense of community and mutual support that extended far beyond its formal programs. The most rewarding part of this work isn't the statistics or the success stories, Victoria had told Marcus during one of their regular coffee meetings. It's seeing how people who were once struggling are now helping others who are facing similar challenges. We've created networks of support that will continue long after the Foundation's involvement ends. Marcus had become Victoria's closest advisor and friend, serving on the Foundation's board of directors and helping to ensure that its programs remained grounded in the real needs of working families. "You know, Victoria, when I first met you crying in that parking lot, I never imagined that conversation would lead to all this," Marcus had said as they toured the newest Foundation facility. "But I'm not surprised that it did. You had the compassion and the resources to make a difference. You just needed to discover your own strength. I think the most important thing I learned from that day is that everyone needs help sometimes, and everyone has something valuable to offer others. The key is creating connections between people so they can support each other. Victoria's transformation had also extended to her management of Blackwood Enterprises, which had become known as one of the most employee-friendly and socially responsible companies in the Dallas business community. She had implemented profit-sharing programs, comprehensive healthcare benefits, and flexible work arrangements that allowed employees to balance their professional and personal responsibilities. The company had also shifted its focus towards sustainable development projects that included affordable housing components alongside luxury developments. Ms. Blackwood has created a workplace culture that actually cares about employees as human beings, not just as resources to be used, had said James Patterson, a project manager who had worked for the company for 15 years. She listens to our ideas, supports our professional development, and has created opportunities for advancement that never existed before. The company's financial performance had actually improved under Victoria's leadership, as employee satisfaction and retention had increased dramatically, and the company's reputation for ethical business practices had attracted new clients who valued social responsibility. Victoria had also used her position in Dallas's business community to advocate for policies that supported working families, including increased minimum wage, affordable healthcare initiatives, and improved public transportation. Business leaders have a responsibility to use their influence to create a more just and equitable society, Victoria had argued during a speech to the Texas Business Council. We can't just focus on maximizing profits while ignoring the struggles of the communities where we operate. True success means creating value for all stakeholders, employees, customers, and society as a whole. 1 year after her father's death, Victoria had established the Richard Blackwood Memorial Scholarship Fund, which provided full college scholarships to students from low-income families who demonstrated both academic potential and a commitment to community service. The first class of scholarship recipients included 25 students, many of whom were the first in their families to attend college. My father believed that education was the key to opportunity, but he also understood that many talented young people never get the chance to pursue higher education because of financial barriers, Victoria had said during the scholarship award ceremony. This scholarship program is designed to remove those barriers and create pathways to success for students who will use their education to make positive contributions to their communities. Among the scholarship recipients was Maria Santos, a young woman whose family had participated in the Foundation's job training and childcare programs. Ms. Blackwood, this scholarship isn't just changing my life, it's changing my entire family's future, Maria had said during the ceremony. I want to study social work so I can come back and help other families the way the Foundation helped mine. I want to be part of continuing this cycle of support and empowerment. Victoria's work had begun to attract national attention, with invitations to speak at conferences on philanthropy and social entrepreneurship across the country. She had been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine as one of America's most innovative philanthropists, and had been invited to join the board of directors of several national organizations focused on poverty reduction and community development. But despite all the recognition and success, Victoria remained grounded in the relationships and community connections that had transformed her life. The most important lesson I've learned over the past 2 years is that real fulfillment doesn't come from what you achieve for yourself. It comes from what you're able to help others achieve, Victoria had reflected during a quiet moment with Marcus at their favorite cafe. When I was crying in that parking lot, I thought my life was falling apart. But it was actually the beginning of the most meaningful period of my life. You know what I think about sometimes? She had continued. What if you hadn't stopped to help me that day? What if you had just walked past like most people would have? My whole life might have turned out completely differently, Marcus had smiled. But I did stop, Victoria. And you did listen. And you did have the courage to change. That's what matters. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact, but only if people are open to receiving help and willing to grow from it. And now look what you've created. Thousands of people have better lives because of the work you're doing. That's the real power of human connection. It creates ripple effects that extend far beyond what we can imagine. As Victoria looked around the bustling community centre, watching children engaged in educational activities, adults participating in job training programs, and families accessing resources that would help them build better lives, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this point. The young woman, who had once felt helpless and unprepared for life's challenges, had become a leader who was helping others discover their own strength and potential. Dad would be proud, Victoria had whispered to herself as she watched a group of teenagers working on a community garden project that would provide fresh vegetables for local families. Not just of the business success, but of the person I've become and the difference we're making in people's lives. In To Continue Claude 4, Sonnet, the story of Victoria's transformation had become an inspiration to others in Dallas's philanthropic community, demonstrating that effective charity work required not just financial resources, but also genuine relationships, community engagement, and a willingness to learn from the people you're trying to help. Her foundation had become a model that was being replicated in cities across the country, with Victoria serving as a consultant to help other wealthy individuals and organizations develop more effective approaches to community development. But perhaps the most important legacy of Victoria's journey was the proof it provided that personal crisis can become the catalyst for positive change, and that sometimes the most meaningful life begins when you think everything is falling apart. 2 years after that fateful day in the parking lot, Victoria had established what would become her most ambitious project yet. The Dallas Community Innovation Center, a 50,000-square-foot facility that housed multiple foundation programs under one roof, including job training workshops, small business incubators, childcare facilities, health clinics, and educational programs. This center represents everything we've learned about effective community development, Victoria had explained during the grand opening ceremony, attended by over 2,000 community members, city officials, and national media representatives. It's not just about providing services, it's about creating a hub where people can connect, learn from each other, and build the kinds of relationships that strengthen entire communities. The center had been designed with extensive input from community members, ensuring that every program and service addressed real needs identified by the people who would use them. One of the most innovative features was the Community Solutions Lab, where residents could propose their own projects and receive funding, mentorship, and resources to implement their ideas. We've learned that the best solutions to community problems often come from community members themselves, Victoria had said. Our role isn't to impose solutions from the outside, but to provide resources and support for the innovative ideas that emerge from within the community. The Community Solutions Lab had already funded 37 grassroots projects, including a community composting program, a neighborhood safety initiative run by local teenagers, a mobile health clinic for elderly residents, and a cooperative grocery store that provided fresh, affordable food in an area that had been classified as a food desert. Marcus had been instrumental in developing many of the center's programs, drawing on his deep understanding of working-class challenges and his natural ability to connect with people from all backgrounds. Marcus has become one of the most effective community organizers I've ever seen, Victoria had observed during a staff meeting. He has this incredible ability to listen to what people really need and then help them figure out how to achieve it. He's taught me that the most important skill in this work isn't having all the answers. It's asking the right questions. Real. The success of the Dallas Community Innovation Center had attracted attention from federal policymakers, and Victoria had been invited to testify before Congress about innovative approaches to poverty reduction and community development. What we've learned in Dallas is that effective anti-poverty work requires a fundamental shift in how we think about the relationship between those who have resources and those who need them, Victoria had told the House Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Instead of a top-down charity model where wealthy people decide what poor people need, we need a partnership model where people with different types of resources work together to solve shared challenges. The people we serve aren't just recipients of charity, they're partners in community development. They bring knowledge, creativity, determination, and local expertise that no amount of money can buy. Our job is to provide financial resources and technical support, but the vision and leadership for change must come from the community itself. Victoria's testimony had been widely praised and had influenced the development of new federal programs that emphasized community-led development and long-term empowerment over short-term relief. Meanwhile, Blackwood Enterprises had continued to thrive under Victoria's leadership, becoming a nationally recognized leader in sustainable development and corporate social responsibility. The company had pioneered a model of inclusive development that required every luxury project to include affordable housing components and community benefit programs. We've proven that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive, Victoria had explained to a gathering of business leaders. Our inclusive development projects are not only more profitable than traditional luxury developments, but they also create stronger, more sustainable communities that benefit everyone. The company's innovative approach had attracted major clients who specifically sought out Blackwood Enterprises because of its commitment to social responsibility, and the company's revenue had increased by 300% over the 3 years since Victoria had taken over. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition of Victoria's transformation came from an unexpected source. Elena Rodriguez, the nurse and single mother who had questioned Victoria's motives at that first community meeting. "Victoria, I owe you an apology," Elena had said during a chance encounter at the community center 3 years after their first meeting. "When you first showed up at our meeting, I was suspicious of your motives. I thought you were just another rich person trying to feel good about yourself by throwing money at poor people. But you've proven me completely wrong. You didn't just write a check and disappear. You've become part of our community. You've listened to us, learned from us, and worked alongside us. You've shown that you genuinely care about our success, not just your own reputation. My daughter's now in college because of your scholarship program. My neighborhood is safer and stronger because of the programs you've supported. And I've seen dozens of families transform their lives because of the opportunities you've helped create." Elena had paused, her voice becoming emotional. "But more than that, you've shown me something I didn't think was possible, that people from completely different worlds can become real friends and partners. You've changed not just our community, but also my understanding of what's possible when people choose to see each other as human beings first." Victoria had been deeply moved by Elena's words, recognizing how much her own understanding of friendship, community, and purpose had evolved since that first breakdown in the parking lot. As she reflected on her journey during quiet moments, Victoria often returned to the simple truth that Marcus had shared with her during their first conversation, that sometimes we don't discover our own strength until we're forced to use it. The crisis that had seemed like the end of her world had actually been the beginning of her real life, a life defined not by privilege and comfort, but by purpose, connection, and the deep satisfaction that comes from using whatever gifts you have to help others flourish. On the 4th anniversary of her father's death, Victoria had established one final tribute, the Richard Blackwood Center for Ethical Leadership, a program that brought together young people from all economic backgrounds to learn about business, community development, and social responsibility. "My father built a successful business, but I want to help build a generation of leaders who understand that true success means creating value for everyone, not just for themselves," Victoria had said during the program's launch. "These young people will inherit the challenges we leave behind, but they'll also inherit the tools and the vision to solve them." The daughter of a millionaire who couldn't stop crying in a parking lot had become a woman who was helping thousands of others find reasons to smile, demonstrating that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you're able to give to others. And in the heart of Dallas, in community centers and classrooms, in small businesses and family homes, the ripple effects of one moment of human kindness continued to spread, creating opportunities and hope for generations to come. The story had come full circle, but the impact would continue far into the future, proving that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simplest acts of compassion between strangers who choose to see each other's humanity. And that's the end of our story. If you enjoyed this incredible story about the daughter of a millionaire who couldn't stop crying in the parking lot until an ordinary man changed everything, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will inspire you deeply. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from in the United States or around the world? What do you think about Victoria's transformation from a privileged but lost young woman to a community leader? Have you ever had a chance encounter with a stranger that changed your perspective on life? What would you do if you inherited great wealth and wanted to make a positive impact? Do you believe that personal crises can become opportunities for growth and positive change? Have you ever been in a situation where a small act of kindness from a stranger made a huge difference in your life? What's the most meaningful way you've ever helped someone else? We love knowing that we have followers in every corner of the country who value the importance of human kindness and community support. Until the next story that will move you and make you reflect on the power of compassion and the potential for transformation that exists within all of us.